From the newest developments in realty and construction to the hottest trends in design lifestyle.
We bring you the top thought leaders, most trusted brands, and the most exciting projects in the industry.
To guide you in acquiring, building, and living in your home wherever it may be.
I'm Jules Cruz.
I'm John Aguilar.
And I'm Isa Litton. Come home to RealtyTV podcast.
This episode of the show is very special and a bit unorthodox because I had just come from a project site. It was a project that we built a couple of years ago. And right now it's been 2 days since Typhoon Ulysses hit the Philippines and wreaked havoc on a lot of the low-lying areas that would usually get inundated by floods. So this catastrophe has hit us once again. Some are saying it's almost as bad as the 2009 Ondoy typhoon, which in recent memory has really been what has caused the most damage and loss of life in the Philippines. But now, with Typhoon Ulysses, I think it's Ondoy all over again. I had just come from Marikina because approximately 6 years ago, I built a townhouse project there that conceptually is supposed to withstand another Ondoy or future flooding as devastating as what Ondoy was. And we always hoped that something like this would never happen again. But we built that house, that townhouse, with another Ondoy in mind. And I had just come from the site, and I'd like to share with you now what happened at the site, because I think what happened there is something that will surprise a lot of people. I myself could not believe exactly what happened, but I hope you get an appreciation for what the people of Marikina have gone through. And also with this podcast, we would like to share something innovative that we were able to do to address flooding in low-lying areas. And this is the project called our Flood Adaptive Smarthome in Marikina. So please enjoy this interview that I had with the residents of our smart home that we built. This is Philip and Mali, all the way from Marikina City. So right now I'm in Marikina, and what I'm seeing now compared to what I saw back in 2009 is eerily familiar. It's almost like deja vu. The way everything looks, all the streets just caked in mud, and everyone's just trying to make the most of the situation and trying to do their cleaning. Hi! Ate, good morning! Kumusta? Hanggang saan?
Dito.
Wow! So yung mga ibang sasakyan, completely submerged ba? Underwater? Yung naabutan talaga?
Naabutan talaga.
Ano? Lubog na lubog?
Lubog talaga.
Grabe. Kayo naman, I mean, safe naman kayo?
Sobra. Sobra. pati ang sasakyan, talagang lahat. Okay, dahil lang isang palidaran dyan yung iba.
May mga nagtatanong din sa akin yung architect namin, tapos dati yung professor ko rin na alam niya rin tong project na to. So tinatanong nila, ano nangyari doon sa Marikina? Nag-work ba yung carport?
Nag-work talaga siya.
Nag-work talaga.
Actually, dami nabilib dito. Sobra.
Oo.
Lahat ng mga nakumusta ng mga kaibigan ko, tinanong yung sasakyan nyo, sinend ko yung video, yung picture. Yun, believe sila. So sabi nila, dapat pala lahat ng taga Marikina may ganyan. Sabi ko, kasi John.
It's working as it's supposed to be. Very good. Very nice. Smart na smart talaga.
Smart home.
So I'm back right now, and I had just come from the project site in Marikina. And right now, I am going to be joined by none other than the architect of our Flood Adaptive Smarthome. He is the Chief Design Ambassador of Buensalido Architects. He is none other than Jason Buensalido. Jason, how are you
Hey,
doing?
John. Doing well, doing good. Good to see you and good to be here, joining you here in this podcast.
Jason, I'm very happy to share with you that the the carport
Mhm.
that you designed, it was a success. So the car actually went up, and the raft that you built pretty much carried the weight of the car. So the neighbors weren't so lucky, but
Yeah,
for our project, it was a success because in their case, the car was spared from the flood. So the occupants were very happy, and they were profusely thanking us, the team, for what happened, because if not for the design, I think they would have had a very hard time. I think some of the neighbors were really devastated and at a loss for words. But fortunately, they were okay.
wow.
So
That's
yeah,
great to know. That's great to
yeah.
know, John.
Congratulations, Jason. Great design. Great work with the design.
Thank you, but congrats to you too. For being the visionary behind the whole thing and letting us do what we did. Right? I'm just happy. I'm just happy.
Yeah, what they were telling me was that the way the project was designed was perfect. I mean, the way I guess we envisioned it and the way eventually we were able to build it um, really addressed the needs of people who were in Marikina back during Ondoy. No, it was a very difficult period for them because they had lost their cars. A
Yeah,
lot of them lost their major appliances. And in this case, it was all saved because of the design that you came up with. So, Jason, I'd like for you to take us through, in your own words,
right.
the design intent for Project Smart Home, because it's been a couple of years. We finished that project back in 2014. It's now 2020.
Yeah,
Um, so take us through the design intent, and when we briefed you, what were the
right.
things that stood out for you that made you design the way you did for this
Yeah,
particular project?
yeah. I distinctly remember when you approached me about the project, and in fact, I think you opened up with an apology, saying that Jason, I hope you. I'm sorry if I sound crazy, but this is I want to. This is what I want to do. And you kind of introduced to me this idea of climate adaptive or a flood adaptive home, and if I was up for the challenge. And at that time, I distinctly also remember that I really was looking for an opportunity to help people that were affected, not only in Marikina, but I guess all over the Philippines and the flood prone areas all over the Philippines by Ondoy. And around that time, we were also sort of looking for a new meaning for what architecture is and could be, and what are new opportunities for us to be able to use architecture to help more people in a more relevant way, especially in response to the ever changing climate, right? And so when you approached me, I think what I told you was, John, no need for an apology because I'm in 100%, 100 million% all in. And so that was the easy part, me
Right.
saying yes. The harder part was actually to get down and dirty, and to prepare the design response. But prior to that, of course, the first step was really trying to understand the situation, because in the firm, our core principle really is this belief that architecture is simply a response to context. And the reality is, the sad reality is that the context that we are dealing with as architects, as developers, as human beings are changing and evolving, not necessarily in a positive kind of manner, but in an ever growing, challenging situation. And one of them is really climate change. Combine that with poor infrastructure, poor governance, poor maintenance of our infrastructure as well, then you result in flooding, right? And the reality is, flooding is part of the context for that specific site that you brought forth to us. And so it was one of the things that we had to respond to. So when we were researching about the situation, we took aside preconceived notions of solutions or typical architectural solutions and tried to understand the situation. And we interviewed people around the specific vicinity and discovered that the way that they prepared for the next Ondoy, which was inconceivable at the time, was they put a lot of plastic bottles. If you remember, right?
Right.
They put it in trash bags. So
that was a very funny story because I remember Gabe Mercado, who was one of our hosts, when we went around, that old lady who you mentioned had that. We thought for a moment that the bottles that she was actually showing us, we thought that they were for emergency water. Right? But in this case, it was very different. What was the use, Jason?
I think she meant for it to be an emergency evacuation flotation device.
Right.
So that was their plan for the next Ondoy or the next flood that would occur, was for them to float away from their home to the nearest evacuation center. Because we found out, you and I, and the team, of course, that the number one problem, because of the rate of the rising of the flood at the time, was escape and access. They didn't have time to react to the flood. They thought it was just another typhoon, not knowing that it would totally erase some of the villages there, right? And so a lot of them were stuck on the rooftop of their houses for days and days. They had no means of communications because their phones were out, uncharged, right? And so we wanted to kind of help alleviate at least this situation in the event that it happens again. But we wanted to make it clear that this architectural solution would simply be a temporary solution, right? Because of course, in a perfect world, the solution would be not to build in these flood-prone areas at all.
Right.
I mean, in a perfect world, you would have infrastructure, sewer lines, cities that are master planned in such a way that they respect the environment, they allow water to go back to the water table and so on. But the reality is that it's not. I mean, sewers are clogged, drains are clogged, and so on, causing floods. So, we try to understand also the situation of the residents, knowing that a lot of them didn't really have a choice but to stay in their current property. They didn't have the means to simply vacate with a snap of a finger. So there had to be an architectural solution, even if it was a temporary one, to allow them to sort of coexist with this ever-changing negative context, right?
Right. Jason, it really brings us to also a lot of people speaking negatively about people not vacating, or they're saying in local speak, hindi na sila nadala, or they never learned their lesson. But what people don't realize is that a lot of these people who live there because they sometimes do not have a choice. They're there because they've been there for generations. That's their only property. And in some cases also, they cannot possibly see themselves uprooting themselves from Marikina, because that is considered home, regardless of what happens on a year-to-year basis, which is very unfortunate because it is not an ideal scenario. But that's the thing. Who are we to judge on their decision? Because it's easy to say, you have a choice. But, if you really look at the situation, to vacate an entire city is virtually impossible. You will have people there living there for generations to come. It is a fact that we cannot ignore. So personally, for me also, the premise by which we built, and when I approached you that time, was because we knew that people will be building there as well in the future, and we might as well build something that would sort of serve as a solution, like what you mentioned earlier, that if there is something that can be done, at least we do it well. And that's really how we came into it, and when we approached you, coming up with that intent. So
So basically, when we were gathering the data, one of the things that we found out was the flood level on that particular street. And if I remember correctly, it was about 8 feet, 2.4
Correct.
meters.
That's right.
And so, once we gathered all of those bits of information, we then started to address them one by one, right? And so, taking our inspiration from the vernacular, right? I mean, let's not stop with the Bahay Kubo. The Bahay Kubo obviously is lifted to be on stilts for ventilation, but then you also have vernacular models like tree houses in the Philippines so that they can protect themselves at night, from the wild, right? So in this case, we took our cue from that. We lifted the house to be on stilts, but now instead of responding to the wild or just to simply get better ventilation, now it's responding to the flood. So the ground level of our property, we filled it up and elevated it, I think almost 1.5 meters, if I'm not mistaken. And then from there, we didn't even build at that point yet, right? Except for the stair access, what we did is we elevated the entire house so that the main house is now on the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor. And then the next thing that we did is we flipped, right, the public spaces, the living, dining, kitchen, which is typically on the lower floor, with the sleeping areas, which are typically on the upper floor, so that in case a flood that is worse than Ondoy happens again, it's only your mattresses, the clothes that are gonna get wet, because the rest of your appliances, your sofa, your TV, your microwave, your ref, and so on, are all on the 3rd floor. And what we did also is we even located the main electrical panel on the 3rd floor. And one of the, the thinking behind that is that even if the flood levels reaches the 2nd floor bedrooms, the family could still evacuate on a larger space, in this case, an open living, dining, kitchen, so that at least they can be together and congregate, not in a confined sort of space, but in a large space where all of the things that you need during an emergency is basically there. Your kitchen is there, therefore your food is there. We put solar on the house, so at least there's also an opportunity for emergency charging and so on. You're higher up on the 3rd level, so you have a better vantage point as to what's happening in the vicinity. So in the simple kind of reconfiguration and rearrangement of spaces, I think we were able to kind of address the flood. But if you remember, we didn't stop there. We added rafts, or what we called regenerative amphibious floating terraces, in the design of the entire home, that came in 2 forms. The first was actually a balcony raft, right? It was a balcony that can detach so that you can row yourself to the nearest evacuation center, addressing now the problem of escape. And now, if you listen to the news, in the past couple of days, flotation devices or even boats were being requested for in the form of donations, because that's exactly what, let's say, the lifeguards or people would need so that they can save the families who were stuck in their homes, right? So we gave them that, if you remember, and we tried our best to make it as simple as possible. I remember that we were even joking that okay, the first one who buys the home, we will give you a free oar or a saguan, right? And at that time, it was really a funny matter,
Right.
not knowing that it would be needed again, right? And most of us, well, all of us would actually say, I wish that this home would never be needed.
Exactly. You know what? When you had reached out to me the other night asking how they were,
Yeah.
I thought we would never get to that point, because we all wish that another Ondoy would not happen. Unfortunately, it has again.
Right.
But Jason, would you like to find out what happened?
Oh yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Especially with the carport, because
Right.
as I was mentioning, there were 2 kinds of rafts, right?
Uh-huh.
One was the balcony, so that you can detach it, and the other one is a carport that sort of floats in place. Because as you know, during Ondoy, a lot of people lost their cars, their homes, their appliances,
Right.
and a lot of the insurance companies wouldn't even want to insure your vehicle, knowing that you live in a flood-prone area. And so another kind of solution was called for. So in this case, it was a raft that would allow your car to float in place. And I remember that you and I, we tested it on Marikina River, right?
Exactly.
Unfortunately,
Exactly.
nobody wanted to volunteer his or her car at the
Exactly.
time. So we had to approximate the weight of a small, vehicle with sandbags and all. And then I think there were 6 of us
Uh-huh.
floating on the river, on the raft itself.
That's correct.
Yeah,
With Doc Ted Esguerra, he will
exactly.
be joining us on the show later. But Jason, you have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you exactly what happened. So I was just there this morning,
Yeah.
and well, the occupants, the residents, were very surprised that well the floatable carport floated. Essentially, their car, which is a sedan, was
Right.
spared from the flood.
Wow.
So the great thing about the design is that the very first floor itself is actually already elevated. We built higher. I think, like you
Right.
said, it was about a meter and a half higher than the street
Street
level.
level. Yeah.
So that aided
Yeah.
their car. But apart from that,
Mhm.
when the flood waters came in,
Yeah.
they were so surprised that the car actually started going up.
I'm
You would
having
hardly.
goosebumps, John. You have no idea. You have no idea.
They were saying that they could hardly feel it, see it because it was very stable, the way that it was going up. So you can just imagine the flood waters coming in. It would be gradual,
Right.
but there was no instability whatsoever, according
Mhm.
to them, in terms of how it was slowly going up. So you could hardly notice that this thing was actually taking the car
Wow.
up
Wow.
higher and higher and higher. And
But
here's the
it
thing,
landed on the
Jason.
same house. It landed on the same house. It didn't land on another property.
So that's the great thing about your design, Jason, is that because you had these guideposts that allowed the carport to stay in place, they were actually very scared that that would be the case, where that it would get swept away. But because you had your guideposts there, it was stable and it was just held in place. Now, the amazing thing about this is that it was 6 a.m. They were telling me
Mhm.
the flood water started coming in, but when they sensed that the car itself was floating, they were no longer afraid for the water coming into the car. Do you know what they were afraid of?
No.
Um, they had built a makeshift roof
Okay.
overhang
Okay.
above the carport,
Oh, okay. All
which
right.
which I know was never your design intent, right?
Right.
They had built a roof on top of
Right.
it, so they were actually worried that their sedan would hit the roof.
Yeah.
Because Jason, you never designed it that way. It was supposed to
Because
be
of that
open.
purpose. Because of that
Exactly.
purpose. Yeah.
It was supposed to go up. So they had built a roof. So their fear was if it had gone up further, then definitely the car would have hit their roof,
Right. So
which they
it
had.
didn't. It
It
didn't.
didn't. It didn't. But they put some cushions there.
Okay.
So they were saying that it was almost there. I mean, had
Okay.
the
Right.
flood
Wow.
waters gone up a little bit more, then the
Wow.
car would have hit the roof.
Yeah.
So it was that crazy, and they were just very thankful that they had that, because if they could see, I mean, they were looking around, people were swimming to
Right.
check on their cars, which they had parked across, a few blocks on a higher plane.
Right.
So those that could not move their houses, forget it. Their cars
Yeah.
were all underneath neck deep waters.
Did they
So
have to use the balcony raft, or did they lend it to?
so
Yeah.
fortunately, the balcony raft, they did not have to use it.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I saw it a while ago and it was never touched.
Right.
So they were saying that although this flood was pretty high, it was not as high as Ondoy
Yeah.
that time, because that time it was, I think, 8 feet.
Right.
In this case, it was still above a
What
normal
happened?
typical Filipino, right? A typical Filipino is about maybe 5'5", 5'8".
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it was still above a normal person's height, but not high enough that it was as high as Ondoy. So
Okay.
fortunately, they did not have to use
Wow. Okay.
the raft
Yeah.
that you designed for them.
That's
But
good.
yeah, they were very thankful, relieved, amazed.
Wow. So
A
am
lot of
I.
their neighbors, yeah, I mean, a lot of their neighbors went to them and were checking up on the car. They were truly amazed because
Yeah. Yeah.
they saw for themselves how the car was floating.
Right. Right.
And a lot of their friends also checked up on them, people who knew that they were living in Marikina, and all they could say was, it's amazing what just happened to us.
Yeah.
Because
They could actually have lent their balcony raft to those neighbors who were swimming to check up on their cars. I mean,
that's possible.
that
That
could
they
have been
could have done
a,
that.
yeah.
They
I'm
could have done
sure
that.
in the midst of all of those, all of the panic, they didn't think about it.
Right.
But in the future, that could be a possibility.
Right. And you know what also happened, Jason?
Yeah.
So their neighbors across the street,
Right.
actually they invited them to the house. So what
Okay.
happened is that the husband and wife, they were on the second floor. So the bedrooms are on the second floor, right?
Right.
So their three kids, they allowed them to sleep upstairs with
Okay.
two of their kasambahays, two of their
Okay.
helpers. The husband and wife, they were on the second floor in the master's bedroom,
Mhm.
but two families they invited to stay with them. So in the other room on the second floor, they actually had two families staying with them there.
Wow.
So there were three families in total in that house during the night of that very heavy storm.
Wow.
And it was a lifesaver for them. And they were just very thankful that they said in these words, not these exact words, but they said this house, the way it was designed, is perfect for what we just experienced. Because if you come to think of it, none of their major appliances or furniture were damaged because the ground floor is practically empty.
Right.
They had enough room so that they could invite other people to join them, and their car was safe. And the food, all their major supplies, their air conditioning system, the electrical, it was all on the third floor. So brilliant, Jason! Congratulations. The design fits specifically their dilemma. They were actually thinking at a certain point, like a year or two ago, that should we have really gone this far
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
purchase something like this crazy?
Right.
But they were last night just thinking, buti na lang, or thank God. I think they tried to express in words, but all they could say repeatedly was thank you
Wow.
for
Wow.
building this and
Thank,
for doing this.
thanks for telling me that story, John. Because truth be told, the first day that you approached me, yes, I'll do it, right? But then half of me was, of course, scared that can we really deliver? I mean, we're talking about something that's very serious that could
Right.
mean life or death for
Right.
a lot of families, right? And that story really warms my heart and fills my heart, and I guess gives us the courage to, I guess, continue to look for more ways on how to transform architecture as a platform to help or improve even more lives, right? And what you just said is actually very funny because we can be so intentional about designing a lot of things, but then at the end of the day, sometimes you don't know what the design is going to transform into. Like, for example, we wanted a house that can allow people to escape,
Right.
not even thinking that this same house that we designed can be an evacuation center for your neighbors, for the
Exactly.
people that they live with in the vicinity.
Exactly.
So wow, John, thank you. Thank you. You can't imagine the goosebumps that I'm having right now.
And this project, I think, is something that I would like a lot of people to know about.
Yeah.
I think every time there's a major storm, I think
Yeah.
you and I always look to this and kind of
Yeah.
have something at the back of our minds going. There's something there that, okay, how I wonder how they're doing, and if the house is holding up. I think this year and this storm in particular is proof that an Ondoy, or in this case, this recent catastrophe, is not going to be a once in a generation thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this will be something that will be part of our, I guess, normal lives. I mean, if you're living in a low-lying area like Marikina, it's going to be part of your life. There's no way to escape it.
Yeah.
But I think if people learn to be able to work with what they have and be smart about how they design and build, and eventually how they also respond to, you know, a flood such as this, I think we'll be able to save more lives, and allow people to save not just life but property as well. Because I think, and this is a case in point, this resident,
Mm-hmm.
they were hardly affected. They were scared, but they came out of it just really thankful that they were all safe, and in the process also helping other people. So I think, Jason, if we could spread this to more people,
Yeah.
you don't actually have to have, I think, a floatable carport to
Yeah.
learn from this experience. I think a lot of what you shared through the design of this, people can adapt in their own home designs, right? It's not like you need something as I guess experimental as a floatable carport, because a lot of the things that you put into the design of this house, people can actually learn from.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I remember when you briefed me about the project, Jason. I want to call it Project Smart Home, but as you know, there are different definitions of smart, right? On one hand, you have the high tech smart, automatic lighting, smart home, voice activated equipment, and so on. But on the other hand, there's just smartly designed homes in the sense that basic logic. So in this case, majority of the design components were low-tech solutions, simple rearrangement of spaces, using a technology that didn't allow water to infiltrate the walls in the event of flooding. I mean, the flotation devices were just bonuses that you indulged in experimenting with us as well. So that was a bonus, and we were not able to install in all of the houses, right? But because of the budget constraints as well. And so exactly what you said, that a lot of the features of Project Smart Home, or this climate adaptive or flood adaptive smart home, can be replicated, right,
Right.
in majority of people's homes.
Yes. Jason, going back to when we were building this, I remember the first time that you came up with the design and we tried to do the costing.
Yeah.
I think the initial design was very prohibitive because the initial concept, I think, would have us use those drums, right? Those blue
Right.
drums,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So,
Mhm.
so that was the original design.
Mhm.
But then again, when we were doing the pencil pushing,
Yeah.
the total cost just to be able to build and accommodate that, I think, went to over 1 million just for the
Yes.
carport.
Yes.
So luckily enough, we were able to find other suppliers for what we used for this particular project,
Yeah.
which are the flotation devices that you would usually see in those docking areas
Yes.
in beaches or marinas.
Yeah.
And because we had used a smaller profile for the flotation device, we were able to significantly lower the cost. I'm still not too happy with how it was prohibitive in terms of cost because it was a one-off, right?
Right.
We don't
Right.
have the economies of scale. We were experimenting. To be honest, I think when we spent, I think we were able to spend more or less around 500,000 pesos in terms of cost for the floatable
The device.
carport.
Yeah.
So that's with the flotation device
Yeah.
and the steel framing. But I feel, Jason, that I think if developers, if people who are looking to build something similar
Mhm.
can do this, with economies of scale in mind, I think we could really make this a solution that can be
Yeah.
affordable
Yeah.
and that can be feasible for a lot of subdivisions that are in low-lying areas. I think
Yeah.
this is a starting point, and
Yeah.
I think in the future, whether it's you or other people, they can be more creative as well in how they can try to imagine, themselves as well adapting to a flood. I think this is one, although very crazy but effective
Yeah.
example of ingenuity, a little bit of creative, innovation. And I think we at that time were in a point in our lives. I think we were both in our early 30s,
Yeah,
when we were willing to try anything, right?
yeah.
But of course, in the context of it saving people and allowing them to I guess have a fighting chance when it comes to a flood or a calamity like this.
You made a very important point, John. I remember when we were discussing also before, we were saying that, we didn't want to um, basically provide a solution that they would have to come to us for them to be able to build, right?
Right.
We wanted to come up with an idea that could at least be a starting point,
Right.
that could at least inspire other people, or at least that could allow people to think that, hey, yeah, that could be possible. What if we do this? What if we make it better, right? And I guess what happened was that ever since we built it, there was no need for the said flotation devices that we put in place. But now that the need arose, no pun intended, right? Hopefully, really, developers who have the financial capacity to build homes like this at a large scale will think about it as well, so that lives will be saved, lives will be improved, as you said.
Jason, I think this experience has taught us that, as a developer and you as a designer, as an architect, we really can make a difference. And I think that if you are creative and if you think of things beyond, because, to be honest, for us to gamble on something like this as a pocket developer was no joke, because I knew for a fact that building something like this would incur cost, right? I knew that it would not automatically translate to profit, right? I knew that it was a risky proposition, and I knew at some point it was maybe not the best thing to do if all I wanted to do was just to earn from a project, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I think the bigger picture here is that doing something like this and what it does for Marikina, for example, I think that you cannot pay for in terms of any monetary, I guess, incentive or amount. Because I think what this does for the community is that despite what happened, it gives them, I guess, an opportunity to think and imagine what can be done in the future.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the most important thing with what we had just done with this project. It's really giving people, I guess, that moment to think that this is going to happen to us, whether we like it or not, more often than we
Yeah. Yeah.
care to imagine. And I think they really have to act now, because it's so funny. When I was going around Marikina earlier, people were cleaning up. There
Yeah.
were even people who were painting their gates already, right? So, life will go on, and it always will.
Yeah.
But it can go on in a better way. And I think you can bounce back from something like this better if you're more prepared.
Yeah.
So I think, Jason, I think it's great that you came up with this design, because and I do hope that a lot more people
Yeah.
come by the project and try to check and see. And also in the show notes, we'll also share, with your permission,
Right.
the design, and
course.
hopefully that more people, architects, designers, developers, even people who are building their own homes, learn from the design principles that we've shared here in the project.
I'm just really so thankful, John, that you approached us in particular, because we also were trying to look for more meaningful projects at that time, specifically when you approached us until now. But of course, the reality is majority of developers, their number one goal and objective is always profit, and then everything else is secondary. But when you approached us, profit and the commercial viability of the project was secondary to you. The first was really how to come up with a way to help people in these flood-prone areas. And when you said that, we told ourselves that, hey, this opportunity will not come by very often. In fact, it never had ever since you chose to work with us. And so when you said that, hey, this is our kind of target market. This is our working budget. If you remember, we agreed to waive our fees, John, just for us to be given the kind of opportunity to use architecture and design to help people, right?
That's right.
And so I hope also that this would be a wake-up call to not only the designers, for them to realize that there's architecture can be beyond the usual, beyond the norm, right? But also to the developers, to the builders of homes, to the people who really come up with these physical shells wherein we get to live our lives, right? To really come up with solutions that are sensitive to context, and that context is different from place to place, from person to person, and from family to family. So yeah, thanks, John, and to your entire team for giving us this once in a lifetime opportunity.
Jason, thank you also. It is our pleasure and our honor to have you join us for this project. It's been a few years since we finished
Yeah.
this project, but I think the impact is going to be felt hopefully many, many more years to come. And I hope this is the start of something, I guess, a little bit more positive
Yeah.
for people who are in places such as Marikina.
Yeah.
And I think our brothers and sisters in Cagayan also
Right.
are very, very badly affected. We hope that this can be also something that can serve as, I guess, an inspiration or at least allow people to also imagine what they can do
Yeah.
in other parts of the country. I think this has been a great collaboration, Jason, and thank you for doing this with us. It's been an honor. It's a great honor to work with someone, give things like this a shot.
Thank you, John, for giving us the opportunity. It's an honor too.
Okay, so that was Jason Buensalido, Chief Design Ambassador of Buensalido Architects. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, John.
Okay, right now we're joined by another very special guest. He is a disaster and relief operations expert. He is none other than Dr. Ted Esguerra. Doc, thank you for joining us here on the podcast.
Hi. Hello, John, and I hope you are okay and you're safe.
Yes, I'm very, very safe, Doc. Thank you for joining us here today. I know the past few days have been really extremely busy for you. You've been helping, as usual, the victims of this very devastating Typhoon Ulysses. And hats off to you, Doc. I know that just a few months ago, you actually were confined in the hospital. You are a COVID survivor.
Yeah.
Here you are a couple of months later, doing your usual thing of helping people, evacuating and giving relief to our kababayans here in the country. So, Dr. Ted, remember we had Project Smarthome, the flood adaptive home that we built. I had just come from there this morning, and I have a bit of good news for you. So the floatable carport actually floated. So
Wow.
remember, yes, we tested this in Marikina River with you.
Yeah.
So you helped us test this, and it actually floated, Doc. Yesterday, they told us that their car was actually saved by the floatable carport. Well, first of all, thank you for being part of this project and for helping us test it when we tested it with you in Marikina River.
John, I was being asked, I think, by one program on how we can resolve the issue. Because, you cannot separate the man from the land.
Right.
Even if it's like, you're alongside Marikina River, and it's not going to end up like magic. It's like the story of the people in Indonesia after the great tsunami. After 6 months, you can find them near the place where their families have perished. And same with Yolanda. Now, let's just use technology before. What they did was stealth houses. And with a smart home, smart house, and it's some sort of way we can align. It's a Darwinistic principle that we cannot combat the effects of this hydrometeorological hazard, but You have to align with it. Now, if we cannot remove you from the area where it floods frequently, then we have to readjust our abode, our behavior, and our lifestyle. So gusto ko yung house na yan. Kasi we have to make it that way because whether we like it or not, we have to go back so fast. Kasi katulad ngayon, I've been requested by some few friends from Marikina, even from our good friend there, si Dave David, the one who has the DRR. We are cleaning it up right now, requesting volunteer firefighters to bring their fire trucks there and clean households. Now, if you have those smart homes wherein the place that the base part is just simply, it's just empty, just to prepare for something else, and it can be adjusted into something. But if there's flooding, there's not much maintenance there, which will really cost us a lot. Number one, number two, in the issue of resilience, it is how you bounce back so fast, para we can go back to our normal lives. Now you end up cleaning and fixing your house because it's not as smart as it should be. I think it is that's not very productive when it comes to we call the resilience campaign. No? Sabi nga ni Darwin, no? Hindi natin pwedeng banggain kung ano man yan. But we can just go with it. The thought, because it's there. Pagbaba, typhoons are there, and we will be visited from time to time. Particularly, Philippines is one of the vulnerable countries when we talk about rising seawater and the frequency of typhoons and heavy rains. And of course, the great rivers like Marikina, and then because of progress that we put lots of residences and industrial zones, and there comes the urban flood. Wala tayong magawa. The new stealth houses being practiced in Vietnam and in this location is the same way the concept of the smart home. So it's we are aligning it that way, no? For us to be robust and to be resilient. Yan ang isang maneuver dyan.
Doc, we really appreciate having you on board when we tested the smart home, particularly the floatable carport, when we tested it with you, of all places, in the Marikina River. So thanks to your expertise, we went out there and tested the floatable carport, the raft, when we put it out there and simulated the weight of an SUV with our own body weight. I think there were around 6 of us there, plus sandbags that simulated the weight of an SUV. And we did a couple of movements on board to test the stability. And I think we got your thumbs up back then, and we felt that it was going to be safe. But there's nothing like really a real life application that puts whatever it is that you do to the test. And yesterday was the test that carport has been waiting for, which, knock on wood, is not something that we wish would have happened, but it did. And it stood up. It stood up to the flood. And I'd like to get a sense of what that means to someone like you, who is constantly faced with trying to rescue people time and again, trying to save lives, property as well. What does something like this mean to you in the context of looking at, let's say, rescue efforts? Because apart from the carport, we also had the floatable balcony that would serve as an escape mechanism, which I also tested with you. If you remember, we were in Marikina River, you and I, testing that small raft and going back and forth and trying to test our weights and trying to see if we could actually row using that small raft. So take us through, Doc, what you remember from that moment, because fortunately they did not need to use that. But obviously there's a need for a raft contraption in your place of residence.
I agree with you, John, because there might be freak incidents wherein the flood is so massive, and it will really it will be of so much, the volume of water from the likes of Sierra Madre, and we might be able to it might reach into the next floor of the smart home. Then we have this escape pod or the escape balcony. This is better than waiting for your chance on the rooftop. And what if there's really none? Like what's happening right now in Cagayan. So the escape balcony can help us out. And it's not only like escape balcony. I just would like to remind everyone, the smart home has also amenities like you have to have like the life ring and the vest, that because that's mandatory. So it's like a package of everything. And I think this is the best way to really give importance in how much is your family. I always ask people, if you want to prepare, it's like you go passing the board exam or bar exam. It's like going to heaven. You just don't make it happen by eating tapsilog. So you have to work on it. Smart home is like that. It is putting value to a family. Home in Tagalog is tahanan. Hango sa salitang tahan, meaning peace. Now, if you have like those amenities which can widen the margin of survival of your mother, father, son, daughter, that is really a smart family in a smart home. And being a smart family in a smart home is a family that looks into the hazard, which is so personal. People forget that hazards hit you very personally. So this is how we can reconfigure ourselves, help ourselves in order for us to have better way forward in looking at these incidents, because whether we like it or not, yearly it's gonna knock on our door. So always find the worth in your family by looking into the whites of their eyes and say, how much is my family? Now, if you think that if your family is cheap, then maybe we don't avail of any survival techniques or amenities. But if you think your family is like heaven on earth, I think we have to be smart enough to understand situations by having the likes of smart home.
Doc, that really means a lot coming from you who has seen both the forest and the trees, literally, because 1 minute you would be high up, hundreds, maybe even thousands of feet up in a chopper overseeing rescue operations. And another minute you're down there in the trenches, or in this case, in the neck deep or even beyond floodwaters, deep in rescue efforts for our kababayans. And at the end of it, and the whole point of it being, which is to your point, it's really how much do you value your family. I think that's coming from you and someone who's also had a brush with death many times, most recently with your COVID scare. I think it also puts into perspective just what we value and where we put, I guess, value in. You have to invest in preparing for events such as this. We can no longer take something like this for granted. It will be happening every so often. Before, we thought Ondoy was a once in a lifetime or once in a generation event. Obviously, that is no longer the case. It's always going to be happening. And Doc, I'd like to get your opinion, your advice for those who value their lives, the lives of their families, their family members, people who are living in low-lying areas. What are the practical tips or advice that you can share that anyone can do? Not just someone who probably has resources to come up with something special like a floatable carport, but practical advice that any family who is put in such a situation can adapt into their household.
Okay, number one is for us to know, like collaborating with our barangay or municipal or city disaster risk reduction management office. Ask them, or through the internet, the hazards that are around the community, flooding, fire, whatever it is. Two is you really have to prepare your household by creating plan. Or in case there is like flooding, what do we do? Or other hazards like fire. Next is you have to do stockpile in case we will be in the shelter in place protocol is being ordered, or we have to come up with go bags per member of the family, including your pets and your livestock if nasa probinsya ka. in case we need to evacuate. And last but not least is we have to practice it from time to time so that collectively the community will be more into it, will be more engaged. And then we have to note that in case we are being hit by the typhoon and we're inside the house, then we have to do maneuvers like, since we don't have storm shutters yet, I hope Smart Home will create storm shutters. These are like metal jalousie in Pacific countries that you can close them to for you not to have the strong waves hitting your glass panels there. And any electronics or electrical items from the first floor, if it's flooded, then you have to move it back, and you have to shut down breakers, and you have to reserve your batteries in case you need a flashlight, and in case there are no lights, you use the candle. It should be, you have to use it safely, that you just don't leave the candle when everyone is sleeping, because we might survive drowning, but there might be fire. And of course, after the ordeal or after the typhoon, in case we evacuated, then we must not just go inside the house if it's full of debris, as there might be like animals or any like sharp items there that can really injure us. And you can take pictures for insurance purposes, and just don't be sure that electricity is not around, because there might be down lines or whatever. And another thing is we have to take care of our health as we recover and clean our household. And I would like to challenge the community, because the government might not into this, to really understand how we can adjust things, is for us to get talents inside the government and amongst the private sector. So for us to reformat our community and reconfigure our families. This campaign or the advocacy or this project of the Smart Home is one slice of the pie, so that collectively we can create a very sustainable, productive community, despite the issue that our country is along the accident and disaster corridor. So it's not only being reactive that we can define ourselves as sturdy Filipinos, but we have to understand risk reduction. If we can prevent ugly things from happening or destroying our houses, that's the wisest thing that we can do. And that's the essence of the Sendai platform of 2015, the international platform that we are doing in risk reduction. And I think being a doctor, prevention is better than cure. Because if you think that it's a little bit expensive of having smart home, then try accident and try all this trouble, and let's count money after all this after all this post typhoon dilemma that we will be facing.
Very, very well said, Doc. And what really struck me is what you said about practicing, I guess, maneuvers, methods by which you will prepare for something like this. Because up until now, it's happened numerous times, but up until now, people get caught flat-footed. And it just goes to show that there is no, I guess, procedure in place within, maybe it's the local government, maybe it's even within the subdivision, that puts people at a point where they are prepared to handle something like this. And it's not like this is the first time, because it has happened before, and there's no reason why we can't be more prepared for when another Ondoy, another Ulysses happens to us again. So, Doc, thank you very much for your time. I really value your input and time. I know that you're a very busy man. You are constantly coordinating all of these rescue efforts, and you yourself have been very instrumental in helping save a lot of people's lives. And for that, we thank you very much, Dr. Ted Esguerra, for all that you do, and for also escaping the claws of death. Thank God for you being here right now, despite you contracting COVID also a couple of months back. Any final words, Dr. Ted, for all who, I guess, would learn from this dilemma or this constant challenge that we are faced almost every year?
I'll start with the 5 P's, limang letrang P, for this new normal. Let's live a life of prayer. Pray as a family. Uh, Positive mental attitude, patience, with perseverance, and with passion for life and living. And we have this 5P, then we can, create smarter communities with smart homes for us to have smart family. And in this new normal, we will become smart Filipinos.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ted. We will leave you to your very important work of coordinating all of these rescue efforts. Marami pong salamat, Dr. Ted.
Thank you.
So that was Dr. Ted Esguerra. The guy has been all around the world. He was part of the team that scaled, or at least helped the people or the Filipinos who scaled Mount Everest. And it's just such an honor to have him helping us as well with Project Smart Home. So I think this whole experience has taught me personally a lot of things. The first being that although what we intended for this project to be was an experiment, it was really supposed to be an experiment, a play of what could be or what was possible. But in the end, I think this was a very helpful proof of concept for us and also for, I guess, the residents of Marikina. I think if we are able to learn from this, there's no reason why we can't be more prepared for facing another catastrophe, another flood. And I just hope that people learn from what we were able to put out there, because we really honestly want for people to copy this. We want for people to be inspired by it. The design is not something we would like to keep because we would like for it to be open sourced. We want for people to learn from the lessons of our flood adaptive smart home, because we want them to also implement it in their own projects. And that's always been the goal of our flood adaptive project smart home. And through our experience and the resident who shared with us their experience, I hope that you were able to also learn and hopefully adapt the design principles that we shared here on this podcast. And yeah, it's quite, I would say, fulfilling to be able to have gone through this with our partners, because I know that this can be the start of something that can help a lot more people. So that concludes this episode of Realty TV podcast. And on behalf of everyone who's involved in this podcast, from the producers and all our partners, thank you for listening. And we hope that you learned something from listening to our conversation here today. I think this is the start. It's a good start. And I think if we are able to learn from this, there's no reason why we can't be more prepared for the future. We hope that another Ulysses or another Ondoy doesn't happen immediately after this. Although if it does, at least we know that there are people out there who are helping and are doing something to make things better, to make the rescue efforts easier, and hopefully we all learn from this and try our best to move forward. So thank you very much and stay safe.